Welcome back to Retirement Redefined. In today's episode, we're pulling from chapter 16 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel's book, one of our favorite reads around here, and talking about how your life experience shapes your financial decisions. I'm Brad Gotto here with my co-host, Carly Carlson. Welcome, Carly. Thanks for being here with me today in my phone booth.
Yeah. Yeah, you are on the road. You've been a busy guy lately.
Yeah, but duty calls. People want to hear the podcast, so here we are recording the podcast. Luckily, there's places in the airport these days that allow you sound-free access, is what I guess I would call it at this point in time. But before we dive into this episode of The Psychology of Money, we're on chapter 16. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, you'll know we started this book, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, something like that. And every now and again, we come back to it, do another chapter. We're on chapter 16 today. There's 20 chapters to remind all of our listeners. So we're getting close. But before we dive into that, Carly, what's new? How have you been?
Gosh, life is busy. I feel like we are hitting the swing into summer and adjusting to new schedules and new routines. And I don't know. I don't think we've settled into that norm yet, but it's always nice to kind of hit the summer, the longer days, more sunshine. So we're definitely enjoying that.
There's definitely a lot to love about summer in Minnesota, but as a parent, obviously, having to deal with the schedules of kids that are no longer at school, um, it always sneaks up on me. I don't know if you feel that way, but I'm just always like, really? They're out of school already? Like, what happened? Um, anyway, so we're good. Baseball is the name of the game right now. Although one of my sons is already done with baseball for the summer and chose not to play like extended summer ball because he wanted a job. He's 15 now and wants to make money, and I can't fault him. And so he's got his first job as a doing grounds crew work at a golf course and is loving it. And my favorite part of it is he's got to be there at 5:30. So it's keeping him up. You know what I mean? He's coming home and like taking naps because he's so tired. So it's good. But like you said, a lot of movement right now. Very busy. It's all very good, busy. A lot of work travel, a couple family trips coming up as well. And so here we are recording from, I'm actually coming live from Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where I'm at right now. So, but modern technology, Carly, we get to record a podcast from anywhere.
I know. I thought it was pretty interesting. Like today, I have all this fancy new equipment, and then you're not in the studio and recording from an airport. So
Yeah,
that
with
is
AirPods.
modern technology today. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Now, luckily, yeah, I'm in an airtight booth. So otherwise, I don't know that my non-fancy equipment would work as well, but here we are. Um, let's jump in though, because the listeners are here to learn and to become educated. And one of my favorite ways to educate is to um, take really good ideas from other people and talk through their ideas. And as you know, if you're a regular listener, one of my favorite books on money is Morgan Housel's book, Psychology of Money. Um, and we're at chapter 16, and chapter 16 is called You and Me. And so, kind of the main idea here, Carly, is people don't make financial decisions based purely just on spreadsheets or logic, which I think if you pause for a second and think about that, I think everybody would be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But we act based on our upbringing, our fears, the successes we've had, past experience, essentially. And so if you kind of like play that out, what seems completely irrational to one person might make complete sense to another person. And so let's just start out with this. I'm curious if you have any stories. Like, I'm going to put you on the spot personally. Like, is there any fears that you have, financial or otherwise, that are irrational, but it's a fear for you, or maybe even a love, go to the opposite side of the spectrum for you?
Oh, I mean, I think there's probably a lot to work through. The interesting thing I would say is, I'm in a business coaching group, and a large part of what we talk about in that business coaching group is the financial mindsets that we bring to our businesses as
Yeah.
business owners. And I see that a lot with the clients that I work with too. Um, and some of that's even like, little sayings maybe you've heard growing up, like money doesn't grow on trees, or
Yep.
even like if you're a, church going person, the money's the root of all evil, or the love of money is the root of all evil, the way the verse actually goes. But the like those kind of mindsets that can get rooted in. And so I would say one of the things I've really been working through as a business owner is just kind of a scarcity mindset. A little bit more of that, like money doesn't grow on trees. I think you and I have kind of similar upbringings. Like I didn't come from a family that had a lot of money. And so we were always
Yeah.
very like budget conscious. So trying really to like, how do you control and manage all of your expenses? And I remember the first time that you like, go shopping, go to the store and buy something, you don't have to look at the receipt. And that's a really interesting, like what a spot. Like I didn't look at how much the bill was
Yeah.
at the end. Um,
Yeah, I've got money ones. I've got other ones too. Like I have an irrational. I get on airplanes all the time. I have no fear of that whatsoever. But heights, like if I a couple years ago, my wife asked me to put Christmas lights on our house, and I don't live in like some 3-story mansion. It's like a whatever house, like a normal house. And I got on the ladder, and I'm like, I don't know, 12 feet off the ground. I'm like, I'm gonna die. Completely irrational, and I don't know where it came from. But on the financial side, I also, because I grew up with nothing, I'm the guy that like, I still like, you would go to the gas pump and you didn't pump gas until it was full. You pumped until you had like whatever amount of money you had at that point in time, which was never enough to fill the tank. So it wasn't like just filling gas tanks and then you just run it to empty and fill it again. And so growing up that way has manifested as now an adult that doesn't have to do that, which is a blessing, not a brag. It's just a blessing. Um, I'm still the guy that like pulls the toothpaste tube out of the garbage when my wife throws it away. And I'm like, there's at least 3 days of toothpaste left in there that I can squeeze out. In fact, just the reason I think about it is because yesterday or the day before, my wife was like, "Hey, just so you know, I left that on the counter for you so that the toothpaste." Because she's like, "I can't get anything else out of it, but I'm convinced that you can, and I know you're gonna be mad at me if I throw it away."
it's
So I've
like,
got stuff like that.
yeah, it's like scraping the last of the peanut butter out of the peanut butter jar.
Oh yeah,
You can't leave that. Yeah. Can't.
for sure. When uh when the world made the switch from like bars of soap to like uh shower gels and stuff like that, and we started buying them when I was younger, my mom was like all over us about how much we squeezed out of that bottle, like how much of it we used, how much toilet paper we used, that kind of stuff. And so I'm very sensitive to all that. But that's what he's talking about in this book. In fact, I want to bring up a quote here directly from the book. It's right at the beginning of the chapter. He says, "Your personal experiences with money make up 0.0000000, like on and on, 0.00001% of what's actually happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works." And so our personal experiences define how we think the world works. And of course, the reason that really sticks with me is because it reminds us that we base a lot of our financial worldview, how we think about money, how we feel about money, what we think is going to happen, what's not going to happen, on this really tiny sliver of personal experience that we have. But we assume that's the reality for everyone, right? And that's why two very smart people can come to two very different conclusions on investment philosophy or have different reactions to markets or whatever it may be. Um, in fact, I've run into this just even inside our own firm and the way that different advisors react inside of our firm to different experiences. And so um, it's interesting how your worldview can define so much of that. And I think about that with, I don't want to cross the, like, I'm going to be careful here and I'm going to throw the ball back to you and see what you do with this. I think about this with politics all the time because it's so divisive and it's become so like one side versus the other that it's like, how can there be so many people that are so different in the way that they view the way things should work? But it just, that's in a more global view, but than just our money, but that personal experience stuff.
It's interesting that you say politics because, as a person who moved across the country, I grew up in Portland, Oregon and moved
Yeah.
to Minnesota. And Oregon and Minnesota both kind of politically vote the same way overall, but we're still in the Midwest and there's a different kind of cultural feel here in the
Yeah.
Midwest compared to being on the West Coast. And I definitely have learned how much more your environment shapes some of those views after moving. We were like, oh wow, this was truly just kind of where I lived, and um, my thoughts would have and beliefs would have grown differently, very likely, if I had been born in Minnesota. So it's just really interesting to kind of see that from the perspective of moving far away and seeing that change. And I do think that's really true here in this financial literacy space. And one of the things that stood out to me in this chapter is just this is not about this isn't actually about like your education level or your understanding of these topics around economics or finance or taxes. This like you could be the most educated person in the world. I mean, hey, we do this for a living, and we were just talking about our own money
Yeah.
mindset things that we have to kind of get over. And and so this isn't about your, education level. It truly is about like the your life experiences and the emotions that came with those and how that shapes your decisions.
Yeah, there's another quote from the book that I just want to bring up that I think is worth mentioning right here, and that is what you've experienced is more compelling than what you've learned secondhand. It impacts you more. And this isn't my opinion. This is the way that the human mind works. And so it's interesting. So when you bring this into financial planning, how does this practically play out? Because you've worked with all kinds of clients, right? Um, Across like, and so Fiat as an example, you brought up just Portland to Minnesota and geographically the differences. Like we work with families in I think 35 different states. And so we get all kinds of different kind of mindsets and micro versions of worldviews inside of just geography, but like what other areas other than geography have you seen this manifest or play out with different types of clients that you have and what shapes how we think and view the world from a financial perspective?
I mean, I think different age group.
Yeah.
So the, demographic of your client, not just in geography, but in age group, because that changes the world you grew up in
Yeah.
and what was going on, not just in your community, but outside in the world. It's like the, baby boomers or, my great grandmother who had cash under her
Yeah.
mattress after living through the Great Depression. So I definitely see not just geography, but age. And part of that's also just where you're at in life. Are you still in your earning years, or are you, in retirement and now in a spot where you need to spend everything that you've saved? And that can truly change. But I also see it, I work with a lot of business owner clients. And so I'll see it talking to them. I mean, just how much money a business owner feels good about having in their business bank account.
Yeah.
Like, what's that bank balance number? And when it hits like below a certain number, when someone starts freaking out. And there's like rules of thumb for, how many months expenses you should keep on hand and like general rules
Yep.
of, just wise business principles. But those numbers, like in that business owner's mind, it has nothing to do with that. There is just like a dollar amount that they have that if it falls below that threshold, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
panic buttons go off.
Yeah. I think that going back to the age one really quick, I've seen that a ton where you mentioned the boomers' parents, the forgotten generation, the ones that were adults during the Great Depression. Cash was a big thing because their money was locked up. You know, the banks froze and people couldn't get their money out. And so because of that, they were hypersensitive to that and were a lot of them kept cash to your point. Then you got people as an example that came of age or became adults during the 1970s, where we experienced hyperinflation. We had gas lines and things like that. And so they're far more sensitive to inflation. And so those people that were young adults in the 70s, fast forward now, those are the people retiring. And so like these last couple of years when inflation is like a very like hot topic and we're dealing with higher inflation levels, they're a lot more sensitive to it. And it brings about a lot more fear for them than it does somebody like me who's only 43 and didn't live through hyperinflation in the 1970s. Uh, and so that kind of stuff from an age perspective is really important. Me personally, Carly, like I think I've told this story on this podcast maybe a while back, but my wife and I were married in 2005. So we're 20 years into our marriage and I didn't go on a honeymoon, trying to be financially responsible to save money so we could eventually buy a house. And at the time, I was a youth pastor and we were right out of college, so we had none money. We had a negative net worth, and so trying to buy a house was hard. Uh, we ended up eventually being able to afford the down payment for the house in 2007 and bought a home. Well, immediately after we bought that home, the world fell apart. Like, and the housing market specifically. And so there's a whole generation of people that think that all real estate ever does is go up in value. Whereas I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum where I'm like, no, 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 no. My house is not an investment. It is a place to live. And that is my mindset. And I have no expectation of ever getting any money out of my home other than just a place to park my family and sleep at night and that kind of stuff. And it's all based on this idea that the first home I ever bought, I got absolutely obliterated on. And it couldn't have been the worst timing. So it's interesting the perspective. And so I want to drill down to here is what do we do with this? Knowing this, knowing that the spreadsheet is always going to result in the same answer because 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4, right? And there's great rules of thumb, Carly. You mentioned like how much cash you should have in hand, what appropriate distribution rates are in retirement. Like there's all kinds of rules of thumb that are based solely on spreadsheets. And so, what's one practical thing we can take away from the fact that it's not just the spreadsheet that defines our reality?
Uh, I mean, I think in our world, it's really important that we kind of understand the mindsets that our clients are coming with when they come to meet with us. So understanding their experience, their views, what their risk tolerance is, and so trying to understand and ask those questions, and that is part of our intake process on the wealth management side is getting to know yeah, what is the mindset that you came with and what's your tolerance level so that we can,
Yeah.
make decisions that you're going to feel comfortable with
Yeah, I
when we're
think
starting to manage your money.
that's one of the big misses in financial services overall is not asking those types of questions. Um, one of the one of the advisors in my office loves to ask families when prospective families before they choose to partner with us, uh, what's your biggest pet peeve? That tells a lot about a person. And I love that question. And it kind of it leans towards what we're talking about because it helps define what the worldview is in that question. Uh, but on the front end, figuring out what makes you tick, what are you fearful of? What brings you joy? How you view the world financially is just as important as anything the spreadsheet says. The example I like to give, Carly, is forget put money aside for a second. Let's just assume we were in a different field. We were dietitians, and we're not doing a podcast based on the best financial advice possible, for whether it's retirees or business owners or otherwise. It's what's the best diet that I can go on to be as healthy as I possibly can. Let's just say the spreadsheet answer says eat broccoli all day, every day. Cool. But what if you hate broccoli? I mean, how long are you actually going to stick with the spreadsheet? Not very long, probably not even till lunch on day one, right? Whereas if that's something that you love and you can get the spreadsheet to match what you love, that intersection of the spreadsheet and your worldview uh, is the best financial plan that you can have. Because we're all guilty of what Morgan talks about in this chapter and bringing our personal experiences into not just our opinions, Carly, but I think there's a lot of us, and I think I'm guilty of this too, that would view a lot of our opinions as facts. Um, because that's happened to us. And so it becomes factual in our story. Uh, and so I think that asking those questions on the front end and understanding what drives that for you is a really important overall part to financial planning.
Yeah. And I'll say on the tax side, we talk to clients a lot and kind of go in with the understanding that we really want our clients to just hit safe
Yeah.
harbor, right? So we expect most of our clients will probably owe some tax with their return, but not enough tax that there's going to be any sort of penalties or interest, but we're just keeping their money for as long as possible, not giving the government an interest-free loan. But that's a question I ask clients, like, how do you feel if you have to write a check to the government on April 15th? Even if we plan for it, we know it's coming. There
Yeah.
are some clients who are like, no, no, no. Like that idea stresses me out so much. And so even though that's like best practice, that's what we would advise our clients all day long. I've got some clients where we change what they pay throughout the year so that on April
Yeah, and there's
15th,
some
they don't
people
have
that
to
love
write a
that
check.
return. They like to get the big check back, even though the government is not paying them any interest. Um, that's I like to call it the sleep at night factor. And another way that that manifests for a lot of people is cash. especially for retirees, because they were not adults during the Great Depression, but their parents were. And so they're one generation removed and still have a lot of that. Like to them, cash is my toothpaste, right? Where I don't want to throw the toothpaste away. There's got to be more in there. Even though I'm saving myself a penny, 2 pennies, that kind of deal. It means a lot more to me than that. And so we'll get families that walk in the door that have $3 million saved for retirement, just making numbers up. And they want a $500,000 in cash just sitting around. Now, there's no spreadsheet on the planet. There's no financial plan on the planet that's gonna be like, yeah, that's a really good idea. They have just a $500,000 just hanging out in cash. But at the end of the day, what I've found in my almost 20 years now in financial services is if I take that away from them and I convince them that that's a bad idea per the spreadsheet, that at some point down the line, and usually pretty quickly, they're going to want it back. It's kind of like their safety blanket, right? I always think of like Linus, the Peanuts walking around with his blanket. Linus always had his blanket. And we all have these things that make us feel more comfortable. And building that kind of stuff into your financial plan, working with a firm that understands that and isn't just going to spreadsheet things out for you, becomes super important because at the end of the day, we all want to feel comfortable with our money, right? We want to feel comfortable with our plan and comfortable with where we're at. Well, that maintains the best spreadsheet answer we can give combined with how you feel about how things work. That doesn't mean you can't push back, right? And I'm sure you do that sometimes, Carly, with on the tax side of things and try to tell clients, yeah, that's not the best idea. We shouldn't probably do it that way. There's a better outcome for your family. But at the end of the day, how do you find that balance? I'm just curious for you as a professional, where do you strike that balance between pushing back on the families you work with what's probably the right answer, but then also kind of respecting their boundaries and their opinions?
Oh, that's a great one. I mean, I think even if we go back to that discussion about getting a refund on your taxes versus having to write a check, I can have that conversation and talk to the client about why, a refund doesn't make a lot of sense. And instead, what we're going to do is set that money aside for April. So we're going to plan for it. We know exactly what that check's going to be. We're going to have those dollars designated so we can get that
Yep.
cash easily when it's time to write the check. All of that conversation we can have to kind of build a comfort level in. But in the end, the client does get to be the one ultimately to say,
Yeah.
like, yes, I am on board with that plan. And I think in my experience, most people, like, with that understanding and the knowledge that, like, there's a safety net, we're walking alongside you. You're not going to be surprised what the check is. You're going to have the money to write that check. I mean, I think there can be like a comfort level that you can get people to. And then, in my world, we have to do this every year. So if year one is terrible, then we just adjust and go back to the old way of doing it in year two. So we can a little bit play a game. But
Try the diet for
my
one
goal is
year and
that
see
we're
what
providing
happens.
some of
And if you
that.
don't like it, we'll go back.
Or like let us kind of be the safety blanket. We're not
Yeah.
taking it away, but we're changing it
That's a good
in my
point.
mind.
Like, yeah. I love this kind of stuff. This is actually my favorite part of financial planning is the behavior side. And so for the listeners, here's what I hope you take away from this episode. Number one, think about your own money story. What moments shaped your outlook? Try to think back to like your first memory with money. How did your parents think about money? And kind of like my example, the whole toothpaste or the shower gels and things like that I'm trying to like, save. And then secondarily to that, the other thing that I would encourage all the listeners to do is if you are married or in a relationship, does your partner share your money mindset? Like, and if they don't, learn what theirs is and then try to figure out how to find respect or understanding in that. One of the number one reasons for divorce in this country, Carly, is money. And a lot of it doesn't necessarily even come down to the spreadsheet. It's this idea that you don't have the same money mindset that I do. I feel differently. I value different things. And they've never taken the time to sit down and understand each other. And then the last thing would be how could knowing those things change the next conversation you have, either with that significant other or with your financial advisor? If you, as an example, don't work with fiat and you've been struggling with your advisor, and you don't feel like they understand you, it usually has nothing to do with the spreadsheet because they probably have all of your numbers. That's not the problem. The problem is they don't understand how you feel about money. And those numbers in that spreadsheet aren't matching the way that you feel. And that stuff is vitally important. And so if you've not had that conversation with an advisor, or if you've not had that conversation with your CPA, I'd encourage you to reach out because we put a high value on this side of the relationship and understand how important it is. And again, just an encouragement to the listeners. If you've not read The Psychology of Money, I'd highly encourage you to do it. I think it's a good read every couple of years as a reminder on the behavioral side of finance. And so that being said, Carly, we should wrap this up. And so I have one closing thought. Before I do that, any other closing thoughts from your side of things?
No, you hit it. Go for it.
Here's the closing thought. Our job is not to create the perfect plan for you. It's to help people build a life that you actually want to live. And that's that intersection. And that starts by us understanding where you come from. And so make sure that you give grace to the people that are around you. Understand that their worldviews are different than yours, primarily because they grew up different. Their set of facts are different. They lived, they're different ages. They lived in different places. They had different parents. They had different religious upbringings, whatever it may be. When it comes to money, we bring all that into the world as well. And so thanks for joining us for this episode of Retirement Redefined. As always, I'm Brad Gotto here with my co-host, Carly Carlson. We will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.